.NET MAUI versus React Native, which cross-platform choice for .NET teams? Welcome back. Today's topic is .NET MAUI versus React Native, which cross-platform choice for .NET teams. We'll cover what you actually need to know about React Native development. Now, what is .NET MAUI and how does it differ from React Native? .NET MAUI is Microsoft's official cross-platform framework for building native iOS, Android, macOS, and Windows apps using C# and .NET 8+. It is the direct successor to Xamarin Forms, rebuilt from the ground up. MAUI compiles to native platform controls, so each platform renders UI using its own widgets rather than a shared abstraction layer. React Native, maintained by Meta, is a JavaScript/TypeScript framework targeting iOS and Android, with Windows support via a community extension. It runs JavaScript in a dedicated runtime and communicates with native modules. Since version 0.71, the new architecture uses JSI for direct synchronous native calls, replacing the older async bridge that caused performance problems in earlier versions. MAUI inherits Xamarin's model of compiling C# to platform-specific binaries. Teams that build Xamarin apps can transfer most of that knowledge directly. The project structure changed, tooling improved significantly, and hot reload now works reliably. The core mental model stays the same. C# business logic compiles to native ARM or x64 code, calling platform APIs through typed handlers. Let's talk about .NET MAUI versus React Native, side-by-side comparison. The table below covers the criteria .NET teams ask about most. For a broader comparison that includes Flutter, our post on React Native versus Flutter versus Xamarin for Enterprise covers the full three-way picture. In day-to-day enterprise apps, the performance difference between these two frameworks is small enough that most users will not notice. MAUI has a concrete advantage in CPU-bound work that runs directly in C#, because that logic compiles to native code rather than executing in a JavaScript VM. For apps doing real-time sensor processing, image manipulation, or complex local data transforms, this difference can be measurable. For banking dashboards, field service tools, and logistics forms, neither framework creates a bottleneck. The developer experience gap is wider than the performance gap. A C# developer can be productive in MAUI within a day. That same developer moving to React Native development faces TypeScript fundamentals, the React component model, the NPM toolchain, and JavaScript async patterns simultaneously. Depending on your team's skills, that context switch ranges from manageable friction to a multi-week ramp that delays delivery. Let's talk about now, React Native development, when the JavaScript stack wins. React Native development has matured substantially since 2020. Teams that dismissed it because of bridge latency issues should reassess. The new architecture, Hermes engine improvements, and the Expo managed workflow together produce a genuinely stable foundation for enterprise mobile development. On the specific question of .NET MAUI versus React Native performance, both frameworks handle standard enterprise UI patterns without visible frame drops. Scroll-heavy lists, form workflows, and dashboards all perform well in both. Where MAUI has an edge is in computationally intensive work that stays inside the app, not in raw rendering speed. Benchmark your specific use case before making performance the deciding factor in the Flutter versus React Native versus .NET MAUI 2026 debate. React Native development is the stronger choice when .NET MAUI makes more sense for Microsoft teams. In the .NET MAUI versus Flutter versus React Native 2026 comparison, MAUI's clearest advantage is integration depth with Microsoft's platform. If your organization runs on Azure Active Directory, Microsoft 365, and Dynamics 365, MAUI's integration story is noticeably cleaner. MSAL.NET for AAD authentication, the Azure SDK for .NET, and Microsoft Graph all work natively without bridge libraries or REST wrappers. This matters when you are working with an Azure Consulting Services provider on your infrastructure, or when an Azure Architecture Review identifies the mobile app as part of a broader .NET workload. Azure migration partner engagements frequently find that extending existing .NET pipelines to cover a MAUI mobile build costs a fraction of maintaining a separate React Native chain. For teams pursuing Azure app modernization across their .NET estate, MAUI lets mobile modernization happen alongside server-side work using the same toolchain and the same developers. Our .NET application modernization roadmap shows how mobile fits into a phased modernization program. Let's talk about should .NET developers use MAUI or React Native? The direct answer: if your team codes in C# and deploys to Azure, start with MAUI. If TypeScript is already in your stack or you need a wider hiring pool, React Native development is the pragmatic choice. .NET teams on Azure typically have DevOps pipelines already configured for their server-side code. Azure DevOps consulting services or internal DevOps expertise extend naturally to MAUI builds. Existing YAML pipeline configurations for building .NET services cover MAUI apps with minimal additions. React Native adds the Node.js toolchain, platform-specific signing steps, and often Expo build services to that pipeline. It is manageable and well-documented, but it introduces configuration that is unfamiliar for a pure C# team. The Azure Pipelines YAML guide for .NET teams shows how clean a MAUI build pipeline looks compared to a React Native setup. Let's talk about next up: Power Platform, Azure Backends, and mobile integration. Enterprise mobile apps rarely live in isolation. They connect to Azure Backends, consume Power Platform data, and fit into automation workflows managed by Power Automate Consulting or Power Platform governance teams. This is true regardless of whether the mobile app uses MAUI or React Native. For MAUI apps, Azure Backend integration is direct. Azure App Service, Azure Functions, and Azure Service Bus all have first-class .NET SDK support. Power Apps development services and Power BI data can surface inside MAUI apps using Microsoft's official connectors, which is particularly clean if your organization already invests in Power BI consulting services. For React Native apps targeting Azure backends, integration uses REST APIs rather than typed .NET SDKs. A Microsoft Azure consulting company engagement covering both React Native and Azure typically places API management in front of all services, providing Azure AD B2C authentication, rate limiting, and monitoring regardless of mobile framework. Power Platform governance applies at the connector and API level rather than at the mobile framework level, so your Power Platform investments carry forward either way. Moving on to how Q Services supports React Native development and .NET MAUI projects. Q Services is a Microsoft certified solutions partner specializing in Azure, and we have completed 500+ Azure and Microsoft platform projects since 2014. Our mobile practice covers React Native development and .NET MAUI across healthcare, logistics, and financial services. We have built production apps in both frameworks, run them through Azure Security Assessment and Azure Consulting Services engagements, and delivered them in regulated compliance environments. For React Native development projects, we bring TypeScript expertise, new architecture migration support, and performance optimization experience. For MAUI, we bring deep .NET platform knowledge, Azure SDK integration patterns, and direct Xamarin migration experience. Our custom React development services and Microsoft platform practice cover both ends of this decision. Talk to a .NET mobile architect at Q Services to get an honest assessment of which framework fits your team's skills, your platform targets, and your Azure infrastructure. Now, conclusion. The React Native development versus .NET MAUI decision is a team fit question more than a technology question. React Native wins on package breadth, hiring flexibility, and iOS/Android community support. .NET MAUI wins on Microsoft stack depth, Windows/macOS coverage, C# team fit, and Xamarin migration continuity. For most .NET teams running on Azure in 2026, MAUI is the lower friction path if Microsoft is your primary platform. React Native makes sense when TypeScript is already on your team or you need the NPM library catalog's breadth. Whichever direction you choose, architecture decisions made in the first 2 weeks shape everything that follows. Talk to a .NET mobile architect at Q Services to scope your requirements and get a direct recommendation based on your actual team composition, platform targets, and deployment context. We have built with both frameworks in production, and we will tell you straight which one fits your situation.